Today's movie review is going to be about 2023's Foe. There's really no way to review this movie without spoilers, but I'm going to go over some non-spoiler key points first, and I'll give you fair warning, and at that point we'll cover some spoilerific territory. So to start off with, well, Foe is kind of a masquerades as a science fiction psychological thriller. And the basic premise is there's a married couple living in a dystopian future in the Midwest on a farm that's desolate and there's no crops growing. And the husband's been recruited to shoot up into space, work on the space station. Initially, it's an indeterminate amount of time. And in his place, there's going to be a clone, a replica of him to keep his wife company during that time frame. Yeah, I know. I'm sure there's already a porn parody out there, but we're going to talk about the movie today. So, and it won't get into until we get into the spoiler side of it that I'm going to really get into why I say that this is not really a science fiction film, but it's really a psychological drama that kind of uses science fiction more as a prop. But for right now, that's the basic premise. And so the story itself really revolves around three key characters. In fact, outside of some horses and a few bit people, that's it. You have Saoirse Ronan, who plays Hen, the wife, short for Henrietta. You have her husband, Junior, played by Paul Mescal. And you also have Terrance, played by Aaron Pierre. Terrance is the gentleman from the corporation who comes with the opportunity about shooting up into the space station and the replica and the clone, which the husband is naturally very apprehensive about at first. Clearly, he doesn't feel like it's a good idea. So, under this basic premise, it really is about the psychological breakdown of the husband as he's preparing for this journey and the idea of this clone replacing him during that time frame. And he comes through some definite paranoia. And I will say that the three leads do a fantastic job. I think that they really carry the movie. I think their acting is top notch. And I think that's probably one of the stronger points. I will say, if you're not a fan of slow burn movies, if you're not a fan of movies that can be kind of frustrating to watch, if you know what I mean, the kind that are a little excruciating at times, if you're not a fan of a movie that you gotta really kind of spend the next day thinking about to truly appreciate, you probably want to pass on this one. I will say that if those kind of things appeal to you, as strange as that might sound to some people, then you want to give this a chance. And so, kind of with that out of the way, I'll say that visually, I think the movie's pretty impressive. I don't recall any of the special effects that I felt really took me out of the story. Now, the Australian outback kind of stands in for a dystopian Midwest, and I think it did a very adequate job portraying that. I will say that Aaron Pierre's character, Terrance, has this kind of otherworldly nature at times throughout the film. I've compared it very similar to like David Lynch films and like The Mystery Man from The Lost Highway or the cowboy character from Mulholland Drive. There's somebody that almost like transcends the film themselves. They have a lot of knowledge that the other characters don't. And they come across by their motivations being very alien-like. And there are times where you almost question, watching the film, if the character Terrance is a human. It kind of seems strange because it's not even really a route they want to go on. But if you watch it, you can kind of make sense because you start to think he might have figured out his certain motivations. But as you watch longer, it's definitely expands from there. I'll also say that, yes, there's a twist in this movie, and I'm not going to go into the twist, the shocking swerve. I'll say that it can be kind of a little on the nose, but I still don't think it necessarily distracts from it. So with that out of the way, so I think overall, if I had to give a non-spoiler rating, I would say that I'd be putting this as a 6 out of 10. And I'll say that I definitely appreciate it a little bit more after watching it in the next morning. And I'll kind of leave it at that. So you have to decide for yourself if you really want to watch it from here. Like I said, if you like the slow burns, if you like films that can be a bit excruciating because they kind of can seem a little bit all over the place, some twists or turns, but not necessarily ones that are a huge surprise when they come, and ones that really have to focus on a very small set, a very small number of characters, then maybe that movie's for you. Maybe Photo's for you. So now to go further, I'm going to have to delve into some spoilers. So I'm going to give everybody fair warning. Spoilers are inbound. So if you haven't seen it or you don't want to be spoiled, then please turn the video off. If you don't mind being spoiled, keep watching. All right. So if you're still with me now, I'm going to kind of go into why I say that Foe to me is really not a science fiction movie, but really a psychological drama that's kind of masquerading as a sci-fi movie. Because you could take the science fiction elements out and your still basic building blocks would be there. And what I mean by that is, like, take the guy Junior's trip up to the space station, working for a year. I was kind of surprised when it was only a year, like when you look back at it. So you're developing a clone, he's only gone for a year. There's plenty of people who've been on military deployments for a year or longer during the War on Terror. And other, past, military engagements. There are people, science expeditions that are gone for that amount of time or longer. Prison sentences, numerous different things. And so I was thinking that it was going to be like 4 or 5 years, but it turns out to be just a year. So you take that out. You take out the clones. What is this? This is really a story about a marriage. And it's a story about a marriage of a woman who really was in love with who her husband was and now is no longer is. And the husband who's really in love with the shell of who his wife is. And I'll get into why that's the case in a little bit. I also want to say that the shock, the surprise, the fact that he had already been replaced, and this whole time we are listening to his clone. His clone, it's from the start of the movie. It's been the clone and not him. I felt was very on the nose. The initial scene where she's in the bedroom and he comes in and she says, "Can you sleep in the spare room?" And she kind of locks the door behind him. I thought that was a very obvious giveaway at that point. I think one of the things I didn't appreciate from the film was the director spent several, or director, writer, whoever you want to say, they spent several opportunities trying to convince us that they hadn't actually, the original husband hadn't left yet, and this is still the original husband, but I felt like it was really half-hearted, and it was pretty obvious that that was the clone. And the thing is, I don't think it would have took anything away from the story to know that it was the clone, at least after the initial scenes. And I think it was done to try to preserve the sense that they got to have this shocking swerve, and I've always went back to, I feel like these shocking swerves are just excuses for poor writing. And I'm not saying that this movie is poor writing. In fact, I think it was actually good, and I think the book it was based on was well done. And I think some of the stuff in the book, with the use of the quotations and not quotations, doesn't translate into the film, but I think it was a very clever thing in the books. I think in the movie, sometimes they were trying to be too clever. That's something I try to use. But I also go back to this. I remember the episode from Game of Thrones where the Night King, and he was going to be killed. And so, Arya was the one that did it, not Jon Snow. And at the end of it, the D&D, the showrunner said, "Well, it would have been obvious if Jon Snow did it." And I'm like, we don't need to be shocked if anything, a story should have a narrative purpose and it should lead to that. And everything on the show was leading towards Jon Snow being the prince that was promised, being the one that would kill the Night King. And in truth, it kind of killed a large part of the run up to that. But, I don't want to get too far into that rabbit hole. But let's just say that, look, if I order a pizza right now and they show up and bring me a chicken, well, I'll be surprised. But it doesn't mean it's what I wanted or what I ordered. And I stole that example, actually, from a book about wrestling. So, just in case anyone catches that reference. But hey, we all steal from one another. So, let's talk about the movie, though. And let's talk about why I felt like it's really about the marriage deep down, and why I initially, when I finished watching the movie, I thought, I can't believe I just spent 2 hours watching this. But then the next morning, I woke up and I was thinking about it, and to be honest, the end kind of horrified me quite a bit. And I'm going to just say something about horror and horror movies in general. And because somebody's going to watch this and say, what do you mean? There's nothing scary about that. It wasn't scary or whatever. Well, look, I'm a grown adult. I'm not out to be scared by a movie. I don't get scared by jump scares. Driving to work every day is far more scary than any movie's ever going to be to me. Especially to see the other drivers out there. To me, true horror is a sense of this dread, this feeling like things aren't right. And that's the way I walked away from the movie when I really started to think about it. And it goes back to my basic premise of she fell in love with the clone. She fell in love with the clone because he represented to her what she loved about her husband. And at the end, which I felt was another shocking swerve that was very on the nose and very obvious, his wife left him the blank letter, and she was replaced with her own clone. And he seemed very happy and content, even though it was pretty obvious the clone was just a shell of herself. Her personality wasn't there. And I say it's horrifying. Why? Because I think about like my own wife. And I think about her quirks, all the stuff I love about her, all the things she'll challenge me with, everything that brings into who she is. If you were to strip all that away, and she's nothing but an automaton who is just there to cater to myself, then she's no longer who she is. It's no longer the person that I love. It's like something out of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And it's frightening because you don't need science fiction for that. You have it with dementia and other things, Alzheimer's. And to me, that's just frightening to see the person you love and they're no longer who you are. And the fact that he was happy with that at the end, to me, that was just the most repulsive thing. And I was thinking about it this morning and how awful it was. And I go back to the scene where she busted up her piano. And to me, it's always a tragic thing when something that makes art gets destroyed, whether it's a musical instrument or a paintbrush or, even a computer where you might write or you might do some digital art or whatever it is, anything that can be used to make art being destroyed, because that's some piece of art that's not going to happen. Some piece of art lost to the world, even if nobody else hears it, as long as it's made. And she loved her piano. And that was one of the things that kind of gave away that the clone would go down and listen to her, but her piano was in the basement because her husband didn't want to hear it and didn't want her to play it. And that was something that was who she was. And she actually, before leaving, destroys that. And it's almost like, to me, it's sad to think that A, she's giving that away, and that B, he didn't recognize who she really was. I want to touch upon the fact that the part in the movie where they had the clone being decommissioned right in front of her and him, I thought it was the most silly thing, and it was played for dramatic effect. But I'm thinking, why would they do that in front of him? Especially her, who just spent the year around him. Someone she was falling back in love with, a representation of the stuff she liked about her husband, and they just basically kill him right in front of her. I mean, did they not expect that to not be a traumatic event? Did they not care? And I think that's at times where the motivation for Terrance, like I said, comes up most otherworldly or alien. At times, he seems to be very human, and at other times be very otherworldly. And some of the stuff you look at later and after the fact, he almost looked at the clone to me in some ways like somebody like his own child. But then to see him be decommissioned right in front of him, it's interesting. Like I said, that's where I started to appreciate the film a little bit more after the fact, after I thought about it. And so, but I still come back to the fact that the ending, to me, was fairly tragic. And I think that kind of saved the movie a little bit, looking at it after the fact. And that's where I would say, in the non-spoiler part of it, if you're not somebody that's going to look back at it and try to understand it a little better after the fact, you're probably not going to walk away with a very positive opinion of it. I say that it's going to be a movie you're either going to love or you hate, and no in between. I'm in between though, so I'll allow myself that luxury. So I neither love it nor hate it. I can appreciate certain aspects of it. I appreciate aspects that I saw in there that I would never want for myself, never want for my wife or my family. I've seen aspects of it from people I know and family members where they've been in marriages where it's clear they don't necessarily love the person they're with. They love maybe their idea of who that person is, or they love who that person was, but not who they are. And to me, that's absolutely tragic. And I think that's where, the one takeaway from the story is understand who you are and who the people are you around you. And understand, is that where we need to be? So, I'd say if you've lasted this long, you're probably a very small percentage, but I appreciate you for checking out my first review of a film or TV show. I'm going to be doing a lot more of these, and it's a work in progress, so expect it to get better. So this is really just a rough draft trial run, so enjoy. Thank you.